The Xylos Research Outpost clung to the edge of the Whispering Maelstrom like a nervous barnacle on a slumbering beast. Inside its gleaming, sterile corridors, the dominant species, the Cathar, moved with a fluid grace that spoke of generations, unburdened by excessive gravity or manual labor. Their slender frames, large dark eyes, and soft, chiming voices were the epitome of refined civilization. Which was why the arrival of the human freighter, the stray dog, had sent ripples of unease through the station's meticulously ordered society. The ship itself was an offense to Cathar sensibilities. Its hull was a patchwork of mismatched plates, bearing scars from countless asteroid fields and docking scrapes. It currently sat in Repair Bay 7, an area usually reserved for automated maintenance drones, not hulking grease-stained vessels that occasionally thumped from within. Scholar Elara Vayne, a promising Cathar xenophysicist, found her delicate. Auditory senses assaulted by a sudden burst of raucous human laughter, echoing from the bay's vicinity, she adjusted the fine mesh of her environmental wrap, a garment designed to filter out impurities and maintain a precise personal microclimate. Impurities like, for instance, the smell of scorched oil and whatever ozone-like tang accompanied human exertion. Truly, Prefect, Elara chimed, her voice a model of Cathar modulation as she addressed Prefect Valerius Khan, the outpost's administrator. They were observing the repair bay from a shielded gallery, a safe distance from the source of the disturbance. Must they be so unrestrained? Prefect Khan, whose cranial ridges were currently flushed a shade deeper with irritation, made a dismissive gesture with a three-fingered hand. A temporary inconvenience, Scholar Vayne. Their vessel required urgent, if minor, system calibration. The closest accredited human-capable yard is 3 sectors away. It was deemed more efficient. To allow them access, he said the word access as if it were a particularly unpleasant medical procedure. Down on the bay floor, the source of their consternation was oblivious. Captain Kaylin Forge Maverick, a woman whose broad shoulders and no-nonsense expression seemed carved from asteroid iron, was overseeing her engineer. Glitch, you sure that conduit's seated? If it blows again, I'm welding you to it. Her voice, unlike the Cathar's melodious tones, was a resonant baritone that carried easily, even without amplification. It wasn't a shout, not yet, but it had the promise of one. Milo Glitch Corbin, the engineer in question, was a wiry man with grease smudged on his chin and a manic glint in his eyes. He gave the offending conduit a final hearty slap with the palm of his hand. She's snug as a bug in a plasma coil cap. Just needed a little tactile encouragement. He grinned, a flash of white teeth in a grimy face that made Elara instinctively recoil, even behind the viewport. Such blatant, unshielded dental displays were considered aggressive in Cathar culture. Tactile encouragement, Maverick grunted, arms crossed. Right, and Dr. Thorne, are our medical supplies topped up? Last thing we need is to run out of synth skin again because Glitch here decides to juggle live wires. Dr. Aris Thorne, the ship's medic, leaned against a stack of cargo containers, calmly reviewing a datapad. Thorne's demeanor was a stark contrast to Glitch's frenetic energy, an unnerving stillness that seemed to absorb the surrounding chaos. All replenished, Captain, and I've updated the sedative dosages, just in case Mr. Corbin feels an urge to tactilely encourage the fusion core. Glitch just cackled. Keeps you on your toes, Doc. Elara Vayne shuddered delicately. Humans. Their physiology was baffling, their tolerances alarming. They consumed thermally and chemically extreme foods, their bodies healed from injuries that would be fatal to a Cathar, and they seemed to operate on a bewildering cocktail of adrenaline and noise. They were, in the less formal internal discussions among her colleagues, often referred to as space orcs. Strong, loud, unpredictable, surprisingly resilient, and utterly lacking in the finer points of civilized interaction. They didn't even use standardized politeness protocols, often resorting to abrupt commands or, worse, physical gestures of affirmation. Their communication is so percussive, Elara murmured, more to herself than to Khan. Khan sniffed. Primitive. But they Get results, or so the Interstellar Commerce Guild claims. Thankfully, their repairs should be complete by the next cycle. Then we can fumigate Bay 7 and restore proper atmospheric serenity. Forge Maverick, down below, clapped Glitch on the shoulder hard enough to make him stumble, another gesture that would be grounds for a formal reprimand among Cathar. All right, wrap it up. I want us out of this museum before we accidentally break something fragile. Her eyes swept up towards the observation gallery, and for a disconcerting moment, Elara felt pinned by that direct, unblinking gaze. It wasn't hostile, not exactly, but it was appraising, like a wolf sizing up a particularly fluffy, slow-moving herbivore. Elara quickly looked away, her primary heart sac fluttering. The Whispering Maelstrom outside, a roiling chaos of charged particles and gravitational anomalies, suddenly felt less threatening than the concentrated unpredictability of the three humans in Bay 7. The nebula was a known danger, one the Cathar had studied for cycles, its violent currents predictable in their unpredictability. Humans, however, were a variable that defied easy calculation. As if summoned by her thoughts of the maelstrom, a low, almost sub-audible hum resonated through the station's deck plates. It was faint, easily missed if one wasn't attuned to the station's normal vibrations. But Elara felt it. Prefect Khan, already turning to leave, paused. Odd. A bit of turbulence from the maelstrom, perhaps? Down in Bay 7, Glitch Corbin suddenly looked up from his work, his head cocked. Cap? Did you feel that? Forge Maverick's easy stance vanished. She was instantly alert, her body tensing. Yeah, I felt that. Another tremor ran through Xylos Outpost, stronger this time, accompanied by the faint groan of stressed metal. The lights in the observation gallery flickered once, then twice. Elara Vayne's large eyes widened. That was not normal turbulence. That felt like the maelstrom clearing its throat, and she had a terrible feeling it was about to roar. The third tremor was no mere vibration. It was a violent, sickening lurch that threw Elara Vayne against the viewport. A chorus of alarmed Cathar chimes erupted around her in the gallery. Red emergency lights strobed into life, casting the previously pristine corridors in a bloody, pulsating glow. Alarms blared, a cacophony of shrill warnings that grated on Elara's already frayed senses. Status report, Prefect Khan shrieked, his voice cracking into an unseemly high pitch. He clutched at a support rail, his usual composure shattered. What is happening? Automated announcements, distorted by power fluctuations, crackled over the station's intercom. Warning, unidentified energy surge detected. Sector Gamma experiencing atmospheric breach. Containment fields failing. Warning. The message dissolved into static. Panic, a rare and ugly emotion among the typically stoic Cathar, began to spread like a contagion. Several aides around Khan were frozen, their large eyes wide with terror. Others began to move erratically, their graceful motions replaced with jerky, uncoordinated scrambles. Protocols, the meticulously crafted procedures for every conceivable emergency, seemed to evaporate from their minds. Down in Repair Bay 7, the human reaction was starkly different. The moment the second tremor hit, Captain Kalen Forge Maverick had bellowed, Glitch, status of the stray dog. Thorne, grab the emergency kits, now. Her voice wasn't a request. It was a physical force, cutting through the rising din. Milo Glitch Corbin was already scrambling towards their ship's access ramp, his earlier playful demeanor replaced by a look of intense, almost feral focus. Hull integrity holding cap, external clamps look stressed, trying to decouple if the bay doors can even. A shower of sparks erupted from a nearby Cathar control panel, narrowly missing his head. He didn't flinch, merely swore colorfully. Okay, manual decouple it is. Dr. Aris Thorne moved with an economy of motion that was almost unnerving in its calmness. Two rugged metallic cases were already in hand, their contents meticulously organized for just such a scenario. Thorne's gaze was steady, sweeping the bay, assessing potential threats and escape routes with a practiced eye. Another brutal impact rocked the station. This one felt like a giant fist slamming into Xylos Outpost. The lights in Bay 7 died completely, plunging them into momentary blackness before the emergency strobes kicked in here too, painting the scene in stark flashes of red and shadow, the air filled with the shriek of tearing metal and the hiss of escaping atmosphere from somewhere deeper in the station. "Hull breach Sector Gamma confirmed," Maverick yelled over the roar. "That's the research wing. Elara Vayne's section." She was already moving, not towards her ship but towards the bay doors leading into the station proper. "Cap, what are you doing?" Glitch shouted, yanking at a heavy manual release lever for the docking clamps. "We gotta get the dog clear if this whole can is coming apart." "We're not leaving anyone if we can help it, Glitch." Maverick's face was grim in the strobe lights. "Those Cathar are going to panic themselves to death if someone doesn't take charge. Thorne, with me. Glitch, get this ship ready to move if we have to, but don't you dare leave without us." "Leaving you? Cap, you wound me." Glitch grunted with effort as the massive clamp finally groaned and released. "But you better not. Belong. I don't fancy being an asteroid myself." In the observation gallery, the floor beneath Elara Vayne buckled. A horrifying rending sound filled the air. She saw Prefect Khan, his face a mask of terror, trying to pull open an emergency access panel that was clearly jammed. The carefully ordered world of the Cathar was literally coming apart at the seams. "The protocols, follow the evacuation protocols." Khan was chanting, more to himself than anyone else, but his voice was lost in the growing chaos. Elara knew the protocols. They involved orderly lines, calm progression to designated safe zones, and reliance on automated systems. None of that was happening. The lights were out in the main corridor beyond the gallery, which was now rapidly filling with dust and the smell of burning electronics. The designated safe zones were likely compromised. Then the ceiling above her gave way. With a deafening crash, a huge section of ductwork and support beams tore loose, plummeting towards the gallery floor. Elara screamed, a thin, high-pitched sound swallowed by the destruction. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable impact, the crushing weight. This was it. The Maelstrom had finally claimed them. Her research, her life, all of it ending in a terrifying, chaotic mess. Strange sense of detachment washed over her. So this is how it felt. Not the serene, accepted transition her species idealized, but a brutal, noisy, terrifying obliteration. The impact never came. Or rather it did, but not directly on her. There was a tremendous crash nearby, a shower of debris, and then shouting. Loud, guttural human shouting. When Elara dared to open her eyes, blinking against the dust, the first thing she saw was a broad human back, clad in a dark utilitarian jumpsuit. Captain Maverick stood over her, legs braced, arms raised, somehow holding a large, twisted metal beam that would have undoubtedly crushed Elara flat. The human's face was contorted with effort, muscles in her neck and arms standing out like cords. "Thorne! Got a live one here. Partially pinned," Maverick roared, her voice strained but powerful. Another human figure, Dr. Thorne, was suddenly beside her, a bright light mounted on their head cutting through the gloom. Thorne's hands, surprisingly strong, were already gently probing. "Elara's trapped leg. Legs caught under this support strut, Captain," Thorne reported, their voice impossibly calm amidst the pandemonium. "Doesn't look crushed, but we need to lift this beam. Now." Lift it? Elara's mind reeled. The beam was enormous. It would take Cathar lifter drones to move it, but Captain Maverick was holding it, defying it. The Cathar captain was shouting. "Orders," Elara registered dimly. Not submitting polite requests to the station AI, not consulting a committee. Just raw, direct commands to her crew, who were responding with an equally raw, focused energy. It was terrifying. It was barbaric, and it was the only reason Elara Vayne was still alive. The sheer physical power radiating from Captain Maverick was astounding. Elara Vayne, a scholar whose life revolved around precise calculations and theoretical limits, stared as the human woman held the massive buckled beam steady. The Cathar equivalent would require cybernetic augmentation or a dedicated exosuit for such a feat. Maverick was doing it with raw muscle and, from the sound of her gritted teeth, sheer willpower. Glitch. "Get your rusty backside in here," Maverick bellowed, her voice echoing off the ruined walls of the observation gallery. "Got civilians trapped, main gallery access from Bay 7. Bring the pry bar and anything else that looks useful for smashing stuff." A crackle of static answered from Maverick's comlink. "On my way, Cap. Just had to convince the bay doors they really wanted to open. Bringing my persuader kit." Dr. Aris Thorne, meanwhile, was a pool of calm efficiency beside Elara. Minimal visible trauma to the limb, Scholar Vayne. Pressure, but no obvious compound fracture. Shock is your main enemy now. Try to regulate your breathing. Thorne's voice was low, almost hypnotic, a stark contrast to Maverick's roars. The medic's hands, though gloved, moved with a confidence that was strangely reassuring, even as they prodded sensitive areas around Elara's trapped leg. Elara tried to focus on Thorne's instructions, but her gaze kept darting around the ruined gallery. A few other Cathar were visible in the gloom, moaning softly. One was trying to crawl from beneath a pile of fallen ceiling tiles, their movements weak. And then she saw him, Prefect Valerius Khan. He wasn't assisting anyone. Instead, he was furtively trying to wrench open a panel marked Emergency Life Pod Access, authorized personnel only. His usually immaculate robes were torn, his cranial ridges pale with fear. He cast a shifty glance around, clearly hoping no one was observing his desperate bid for self-preservation. Disgust, an emotion almost as unfamiliar as terror, pricked at Elara, their leader abandoning them. The ground shuddered again, sending a fresh shower of dust raining down. Maverick grunted, her shoulders straining. "Glitch, ETA. Coming in hot, Cap." The reply was closer now, accompanied by the clang of metal on metal and a series of enthusiastic grunts. Seconds later, Milo, Glitch Corbin burst into the gallery looking like some kind of post-apocalyptic scavenger. He had a heavy-duty pry bar in one hand, a coil of thick cable slung over his shoulder, and a wild, almost joyful energy about him. His eyes, bright and assessing, took in the scene in an instant. "Whoa, nice redecoration," Glitch commented, his gaze landing on the beam Maverick was holding. "Holding up the sky, Cap? My turn." He didn't wait for orders. Spotting a sturdy, albeit bent, support pillar nearby, he jammed the end of his pry bar into a crack in the floor, using the pillar as a fulcrum. With a grunt, he threw his wiry frame against the bar. "Come on, you stubborn piece of scrap," Glitch yelled at the debris pinning Elara and another Cathar nearby. He kicked at a chunk of fallen plasteel, then readjusted his leverage, muscles, cording in his arms and back. It was a display of raw, brute force effort utterly devoid of Cathar finesse. He was shouting at inanimate objects as if they could be intimidated into compliance. Elara watched, a strange mix of horror and dawning hope filling her. This was chaos. This was the space orc behavior they whispered about, the sheer, untamed physicality, the lack of adherence to any recognizable decorum. Yet the massive beam pinning her leg was slowly, painstakingly beginning to shift. "Little more, Glitch," Maverick encouraged, her own voice tight with strain. "Thorne, be ready to pull her clear." Thorne nodded, positioning themselves to gently ease Elara out the moment space allowed. With a final explosive grunt and a shriek of tortured metal, Glitch forced the beam upwards another precious few centimeters. "Now, Doc, now!" Thorne's hands were immediately on Elara, guiding her, pulling her leg free with surprising strength. The pain was a dull, throbbing ache, but she was out. As Thorne helped her scramble back, Glitch, panting and grinning, used the pry bar to wedge another piece of debris under the lifted beam, securing it precariously. His grimy, sweat-streaked face, split by that wide, toothy grin, was the first thing Elara focused on once she was clear. He looked utterly barbaric, and he had just saved her life. Two more over here, not looking good. Glitch was already moving, scrambling over rubble towards the other trapped Cathar, the pry bar his all-purpose tool of salvation. Maverick, relieved of her burden, directed him with sharp, concise commands, coordinating the effort like a seasoned battlefield commander. Thorne, meanwhile, was conducting a rapid triage on Elara. "No obvious break, severe contusion, you'll be sore, can you stand?" Elara tried, wincing, but managed to put some weight on it. Thorne then moved to the next Cathar Glitch had managed to unearth, a young aide who was barely conscious. The medic's touch was firm, efficient, their questions blunt but necessary. Name? Can you hear me? How many optical stalks do you see? Elara watched them. These three humans, so utterly different from her own kind. Maverick, the indomitable leader, her voice a commanding roar that somehow cut through fear. Glitch, the chaotic engineer, turning destruction into a playground for his unorthodox problem-solving. Thorne, the quiet medic, a bedrock of calm competence in a sea of terror. They were loud, they were messy, they disregarded every protocol the Cathar held dear. But as Glitch levered another heavy slab of plasteel away, freeing the young aide, and Thorne immediately began administering emergency aid, Elara had a startling thought. Maybe, just maybe, the Cathar protocols weren't always the answer, especially when the universe decided to stop whispering and start screaming. This way. Move, move. Captain Maverick's voice cut through the lingering dust and groans of the dying station. She herded the small group of Cathar survivors, Elara Vayne among them, away from the collapsed observation gallery and towards the relative sanctuary of Repair Bay 7. Each tremor that ran through the deck plates urged them faster. They made it back to the bay just as another section of the corridor behind them groaned ominously and sagged. Glitch Corbin, ever resourceful, had already wrestled the main bay, doors mostly shut. The emergency locks groaning but holding against the station's failing systems. The air inside the bay, while still tinged with the acrid smell of scorched circuits from the station, was noticeably more breathable, largely thanks to the stray dog's independent life support, which hummed with a reassuring thrum. Maverick designated a section of the bay near their ship's ramp as a temporary safe zone. It wasn't ideal. It was cluttered with their own repair equipment and cargo, but it was defensible, and the stray dog itself was a sturdy lifeboat. They managed to drag in a few emergency lighting units from a damaged station alcove, casting a less frantic glow than the pulsing red emergency strobes. All right, Maverick announced, surveying their small, shaken group. Besides Elara, there were 3 other Cathar, 2 junior researchers and an administrative aide, all wide-eyed and trembling. Life support in this bay is tied to the dog. She's good, but station power is failing fast. Thorne, check them over. Glitch, what's the status on local atmosphere and power in this connecting module? She gestured to a sealed hatchway that led deeper into the station's cargo handling area. Glitch was already running a diagnostic tool, a battered handheld device of human design that looked like it had survived several small wars, over a nearby station interface panel. Sparks flew as he jiggled a loose wire. Station life support in this whole quadrant is toast, Cap. Red across the board. Power grids fluctuating worse than my last gambling streak. We're on the dog's batteries for these bay lights, but that won't last forever if we're also running full life support for our new fan club. Elara, wincing as she shifted her bruised legs, spoke up, her voice still a little shaky. The station's auxiliary power conduits run through the adjacent maintenance tunnels. If we could access Junction 7B Alpha, we might be able to reroute emergency power to this sector's atmospheric processors. Our technicians... She trailed off, looking at her fellow Cathar. One technician was among the missing. The other was the aide, currently curled up and making soft, distressed chimes. Are not available. Glitch's eyes lit up with that familiar manic gleam. Junction 7B Alpha, you say? Sounds like a party. What kind of interface we talking? Cathar standard, or one of their fancy no-touchy optical nightmares? It is. A standard primary power conduit, Elara said, a little taken aback by his enthusiasm, but it has likely suffered overload damage. It will require precise recalibration. Precise is my middle name, Glitch declared cheerfully, rummaging through a large, dented toolbox he'd dragged off the stray dog. He pulled out a hefty wrench, a roll of thick black tape, and something that looked suspiciously like a modified crowbar with wires attached to it. Elara stared at his chosen tools. Scholar Vayne means it requires delicate work with specific diagnostic emitters and field regulators, Captain Maverick clarified, though there was a hint of amusement in her voice. She turned to Elara. Our glitch here has a more hands-on approach, but he gets results. Maverick then positioned herself near the main bay doors, her stance unwavering, a clear message to any potential panic or interference. Glitch, meanwhile, had located what looked like a fried access panel to the Cathar power systems. Okay, Elara, my lovely Cathar consultant, he said, not unkindly. Talk me through this mess. Where's this conduit hiding, and how much persuasion does it usually need? Hesitantly, Elara began to describe the system, her precise Cathar technical, language contrasting sharply with Glitch's slang-filled running commentary. He attacked the fried panel with the crowbar, prying it open with a screech of metal that made the Cathar wince. Inside, a tangle of fused wires and blackened components greeted them. Ooh, crispy, Glitch observed. Looks like someone let the smoke out. No problem, we'll just put it back in. He then proceeded to do things that made Elara's scientific mind scream in protest. He bypassed safety interlocks with jumper cables. He tested live wires by tapping them together to see how big the spark was. When a relay refused to engage, he didn't recalibrate it. He hit it sharply with the handle of his wrench. You struck it, Elara gasped, horrified, as the relay clicked into place with a reluctant groan. Percussive maintenance, darlin'. Glitch grinned, not looking up from his work. Sometimes these delicate flowers just need a little encouragement to remember their job. Cathar tech is always so overprotected. Too many fail-safes on the fail-safes. Humans build stuff to take a beating, 'cause we know it will. Elara watched, torn between utter disbelief and a grudging fascination. His methods were barbaric, a direct assault on every principle of Cathar engineering. He was essentially wrestling with the technology, bullying it into submission, yet under his chaotic ministrations a dim indicator light on the panel flickered from red to amber. Almost there, he muttered, splicing two thick cables together with a twist and a generous wrapping of the black tape. Now, if I can just convince this main breaker it wants to be friends with the dog's auxiliary output without blowing us all to the Maelstrom's scenic side. He took a deep breath, then slammed the heavy breaker switch home. The emergency lights in the bay flickered violently, dimmed almost to nothing, and then, with a surge, blazed brighter. A low hum resonated through the deck, deeper and more stable than before. From the sealed hatchway leading to the adjacent module, the telltale whir of atmospheric processors cycling up could be heard. Glitch Corbin wiped a smear of grease from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a dark streak. He looked at the panel, then at Elara, and gave a triumphant thumbs up. She'll hold, he declared. Got juice flowing to local life support. We just bought ourselves some breathing room, literally. Elara stared. He had taken a fried, dead system and, with nothing but brute force improvised tools, and an alarming disregard for established procedure, brought it back to life. It was messy. It was unorthodox. It was undeniably effective. A fragile, alien thought began to form in her mind. Perhaps there was a certain genius to the madness of these space orcs. With a semblance of stable power and breathable air secured in their little corner of the crippled Xylos Outpost, a fragile calm settled over the survivors in Repair Bay 7. It was, however, a calm ripe for disruption. Dr. Aris Thorne had established a makeshift triage area near the ramp of the stray dog. One of the junior Cathar researchers had a nasty gash on their upper limb, sustained during the initial impacts. Thorne, after a swift, no-nonsense examination, was now methodically cleaning the wound. This will sting, Thorne stated, not unkindly, but with a directness that made the Cathar flinch before the antiseptic even touched their delicate, lavender-hued skin. The researcher emitted a series of soft, pained chimes. You'll live, Thorne commented, applying a biosynthetic sealant. It's clean, minimal scarring if you don't pick at it. Next. Elara Vayne, observing from a short distance while resting. Her own aching leg found the human medic's bedside manner abrupt. Cathar healers employed gentle vocalizations, soothing pheromonal releases, and extensive consultation before any procedure. Thorne was efficient to the point of seeming brusque, yet there was no denying the skill. The bleeding had stopped, the wound neatly closed. The medic's hands were steady, their movements precise and economical. Thorne then produced several drab gray nutrient bars from a pack. "Human MRE's meal ready to eat," Thorne announced to the Cathar. "High caloric content, good protein, not much on flavor, but it'll keep your strength up." Thorne broke one and offered a piece to the treated researcher, who eyed it with suspicion. "It is dense," the researcher managed, nibbling cautiously, their face contorted slightly. "And bland. Remarkably so. Survival rations rarely win culinary awards," Thorne replied dryly, already moving to check on the administrative aide, who was still looking pale and shaken. "Eat. It's better than an empty stomach when rescue comes." It was during this moment of relative quiet that Prefect Valerius Khan chose to make his move. He had evidently recovered some of his composure, though his robes were still disheveled. He approached Captain Maverick, who was conferring quietly with Glitch about the station's external comms array. "Captain Maverick," Khan began, his voice attempting its usual authoritative tone, though a tremor of nerves still undercut it. "While I appreciate your crew's rudimentary efforts, the situation remains critical. As the ranking Cathar official, I must now assume command of this sector and prioritize the evacuation of essential personnel." Maverick slowly turned, her expression unreadable. Glitch, beside her, snorted audibly. "Essential personnel?" Maverick repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "Indeed." Khan pressed on, emboldened by her lack of immediate shouting. "Myself, naturally, and perhaps one or two others with critical knowledge. Your vessel, the Stray Dog, is clearly the only viable transport. I will require its immediate preparation for departure. We can take minimal supplies, the rest will have to be left." He gestured vaguely at the other Cathar survivors, including Elara. A low growl seemed to emanate from Maverick's chest. Elara felt a prickle of alarm. This was the space orc ferocity she had glimpsed earlier, but now it was directed, focused. "Let me get this straight, Prefect," Maverick said, stepping closer to Khan, who instinctively tried to shrink back. "You want to take my ship, my supplies, and leave these others?" She jerked her head towards Elara and the trembling researchers. "To die?" "It is a matter of pragmatic resource allocation," Khan blustered, puffing himself up. "The survival of Cathar leadership is paramount for eventual recovery efforts." Maverick didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The sheer intensity in her eyes was enough to make Khan falter. "Paramount. You hid, Prefect. You tried. To save your own skin while your people were trapped, I saw you. They saw you." Her gaze flicked meaningfully towards Elara and the others who were now watching, silent and wide-eyed. Khan's cranial ridges flushed a dark mottled purple. "That is an outrageous accusation. I was assessing alternative escape routes." "Were you now?" Maverick's voice was laced with contempt. "Here's how it is, Prefect. This is my ship, this is my crew. And these people," she made a sweeping gesture that now included all the Cathar survivors, "are under my protection. Nobody gets left behind. Nobody gets prioritized for cowardice. We all get out of this, or none of us do." Her ferocity was not the mindless aggression Elara had once imagined of humans. It was a controlled burn, a white-hot defense of a principle. This wasn't a brute. This was a leader, an alpha protecting her pack, a pack that had, by circumstance, expanded to include them. "You have no authority here, human," Khan spluttered, trying to regain control. "Don't I?" Maverick took another step and Khan physically stumbled backward. "Try me. Try and take one thing from these people, one supply pack, one seat on my ship. That isn't offered freely. See what happens." The threat hung heavy in the air, unspoken but crystal clear. Khan, for all his bluster, was fundamentally a coward. He looked from Maverick's unyielding face to the silent, judging eyes of his fellow Cathar. He deflated, his attempted authority crumbling into dust. He mumbled something incoherent and shuffled away, effectively sidelined. Elara watched, a profound realization dawning. Human directness wasn't malice, or at least not always. Thorne's blunt medical care was an act of focused healing, not cruelty. Maverick's roar was not the sound of a beast, but of a fierce protector. These humans, for all their terrifying orcish traits, possessed a raw, unyielding sense of justice and a surprisingly deep well of compassion, even if it was expressed in ways that were alien to Cathar sensibilities. Maverick turned from the retreating prefect, her expression softening almost imperceptibly as she surveyed the small group. "Right," she said, her voice returning to its normal, commanding tone, though still loud enough for all to hear. "Anyone else got stupid ideas? No? Good." She clapped her hands together once, a sharp, definitive sound. "We live, or we die. Together. Glitch, how's that long-range distress call looking? Think you can punch a signal through this maelstrom garbage?" Glitch Corbin ran a greasy hand through his already disheveled hair. "Long-range comms, Cap? That's a tall order. The maelstrom's spitting out enough interference to scramble an admiral's brain. The station's main array is, well, it's mostly particulate matter now, I reckon." He gestured vaguely towards the outer hall. "But the stray dog's transmitter is shielded. If we can find a way to boost its signal and maybe piggyback off any intact remnant of the station's external relays, we might just tickle someone's antenna. Then that's the plan," Captain Maverick stated. "Elara, you know this station's systems better than anyone left. Any suggestions on which external relay might still have a ghost of a chance?" Elara Vayne, still processing Maverick's earlier confrontation with Prefect Khan, found herself being addressed directly. The human captain wasn't asking with Cathar deference, but with an expectation of competence. It was invigorating. "The dorsal communications boom, Sector Epsilon 7, she found herself saying, her voice clearer now. "It's designed for deep space telemetry and has its own dedicated power cell, shielded against minor maelstrom radiation. If any external array survived, it would be that one." "Epsilon 7, Glitch mused, already pulling up station schematics on a surprisingly durable datapad. "Bit of a hike, and the access corridor is probably structurally interesting by now, but the boom itself extends outwards. If the alignment's off or the power coupling's fried, then someone goes out and fixes it," Maverick finished. A hush fell over the Cathar. Go out there? Into the maelstrom's breath? With debris still periodically peppering the station's hide? It was unthinkable. "I can try to interface the stray dog's transmitter with the station's network from here," Glitch said, tapping furiously at his datapad. "Elara, if you can guide me through the Cathar network architecture, their firewalls are a nightmare. I might be able to reroute the signal path to that Epsilon 7 boom, but if it's physically damaged or misaligned, we're spitting into the wind." For the next hour, an unlikely partnership formed. Elara, her initial trepidation giving way to focused concentration, sat beside Glitch, directing him through the labyrinthine pathways of the Cathar network. Her precise theoretical knowledge found an unexpected counterpoint in Glitch's intuitive, often chaotic leaps of logic. He'd suggest bypassing entire subroutines she considered critical, while she'd point out subtle energy fluctuations he might have missed. No, the primary signal handshake protocol is inverted on that relay," Elara exclaimed at one point, leaning closer to his screen. "You need to route it through the secondary processor, then apply a phase conjugate. Invert the... Gotcha. So basically tell it up when I mean down and fetch when I mean stay. Cathar engineers always gotta be different," Glitch muttered, but his fingers flew, implementing her suggestion. To her surprise, a stubborn error message on his screen vanished. Despite their combined efforts, the signal was weak, riddled with static. "It's the alignment," Glitch finally said, frustration etched on his face. "The boom must have gotten knocked out of position, or the primary emitter dish is damaged. Someone's got to go out and give it a love tap." "I'll go," Maverick said immediately. "Glitch, you're needed here to manage the broadcast attempt from this end." "Not without backup, Cap," Glitch argued. "Those corridors are unstable, and who knows what the maelstrom's cooking up next. I'm smaller, I can fit through tighter spots if need be." "We both go," Maverick decided. "Thorne, you're in charge here. Keep these folks calm. Elara, you'll be our eyes on the station schematics from inside. Talk us through the Epsilon 7 access route." The thought of the two humans venturing out into the storm-lashed exterior of the station sent a fresh wave of fear through Elara. But looking at Maverick's determined face and Glitch's almost eager anticipation, she also felt a strange surge of something akin to pride in their audacity. The EVA was a tense, harrowing affair. Elara, her voice surprisingly steady, guided them through crumbling, debris-strewn corridors via their suit comms. Turn left at the next junction. Careful. Structural. Integrity reports show that section is weak. A secondary tremor rocked the station during their transit, and for a heart-stopping minute, Elara lost their comms. Maverick, Glitch, respond! She found herself shouting into the link, her Cathar reserve forgotten. Just a bit of a light show, Elara, Maverick's voice crackled back, strained. Section ahead of us collapsed. We're finding an alternate. Hout. Glitches, admiring the view of the Maelstrom through a new hole in the wall. When they finally reached the external access airlock for the Epsilon 7 boom, Elara felt like she'd lived a lifetime. She watched on a grainy engineering schematic display as their two small icons emerged onto the station's hull. The Maelstrom raged around them, a breathtaking, terrifying canvas of swirling colors and crackling energy. Okay, we see the boom, Glitch reported. She's definitely looking a little droopy. Main emitter dish is caked with crystallized gas. Gonna need to clean that off and see if we can manually realign the directional motor. What followed was a masterclass in human improvisation and sheer grit. Maverick, anchored securely, used a salvaged strut as a lever to help Glitch reposition the heavy boom, while Glitch, using a combination of precise tools and what Elara could only describe as energetic scraping, cleared the emitter dish. At one point, a critical locking mechanism refused to engage. Elara, analyzing the telemetry, relayed the exact torque specifications. It needs another 2-degree rotation, counterclockwise, then apply pressure to the secondary locking pin, she instructed. Roger that, Professor. Glitch grunted, then Maverick's voice. Almost. Got it. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, Glitch's voice came through, panting but triumphant. Okay, Elara, my lovely Cathar space brain. She's as aligned as she's gonna get. Give the signal another go. Full power. Back in Repair Bay 7, Glitch, now safely returned with Maverick and out of his EVA suit, slammed his hand down on the broadcast button. The hum from the Stray Dog's transmitter intensified, on the monitor displaying the outgoing signal strength. The wavering line spiked, then held, significantly stronger than before. They waited. Seconds stretched into minutes. The only sounds were the hum of machinery and the anxious breathing of the Cathar. Elara found herself holding her own breath, then a faint crackle, a burst of static, and through it impossibly a garbled robotic voice. Pete, Xylos, T-Post, is that you? Receiving faint signal. State your ATIS. Glitch let out a whoop that echoed through the bay. Maverick allowed herself a small, grim smile. Rescue was coming. It was distant, the signal was tenuous, but it was there. Hope, fragile but real, bloomed in the dim confines of Repair Bay 7. And Elara Vayne knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her core, that it was a hope bought and paid for by the courage and an unlikely alliance with the terrifying, tenacious space orcs from the Stray Dog. The intervening days were a blur of rationing supplies, reinforcing their precarious hold on Repair Bay 7, and anxiously listening for further communication from the approaching rescue fleet. The Maelstrom still seethed outside, a constant, visceral reminder of their narrow escape. But the faint, intermittent acknowledgments from the Cathar vessel, the guiding light, grew steadily stronger, a beacon of promise in the oppressive darkness. When the rescue ship finally arrived, its sleek silver form a stark contrast to the battered Xylos outpost, it was met by a small, weary group. The three humans of the Stray Dog stood alongside the Cathar survivors, a tableau of shared hardship. A Cathar rescue commander, his robes crisp and his demeanor impeccably formal, received the initial reports. Prefect Valerius Kion, seizing the opportunity, immediately stepped forward, launching into a verbose account that painted himself as a calm, guiding presence amidst chaos, while subtly implying the humans' methods were dangerously unorthodox and had exacerbated the risks. And while the humans displayed a certain vigorousness, Khan was saying, his voice resonating with false modesty, their disregard for established safety protocols and their often destructive approach to complex systems nearly led to further catastrophe on several occasions. Before the rescue commander could respond, Elara Vayne stepped forward. Her own environmental wrap was torn and stained, her usual serene composure replaced by a new, quiet strength. "Commander?" Elara began, her voice clear and carrying an unexpected firmness that made Khan falter mid-sentence. "With all due respect to Prefect Khan, his recollection does not align with the facts." A ripple of surprise went through the assembled Cathar officials. "These humans," Elara continued, gesturing towards Maverick, Glitch, and Thorne, "were instrumental in our survival. When our systems failed, their engineer, Xylos Corbin, jury-rigged solutions that restored power and life support using methods even our best technicians would deem impossible. When we were trapped, their captain, Maverick, and Dr. Aris Thorne risked their own lives repeatedly to pull us from the wreckage." She recounted Maverick holding the falling beam, Glitch's persuasion of the power conduit, Thorne's tireless medical care, and the harrowing EVA to repair the communications boom. "They did not adhere to our protocols, Commander, because our protocols were failing. They adapted, they improvised, they persevered. Their vigorousness, as the prefect calls it, was the raw determination that kept us alive when Cathar order had dissolved into panic." She then looked directly at Khan. "And their destructive approach was focused solely on breaking through barriers to save lives, unlike some who prioritized their personal escape over the safety of others." The barb, though delivered in a calm tone, hit Khan like a physical blow. He recoiled, his cranial ridges flushing a deep, embarrassed violet. The rescue commander's gaze narrowed thoughtfully at the prefect. Elara's transformation was palpable. The timid scholar was gone, replaced by someone who had looked into the abyss and found an unexpected strength, partly her own, partly inspired by the space orcs she now regarded with a complex mix of awe and respect. She saw them now not as unthinking brutes, but as a species possessing a startling, almost primal vitality, a chaotic creativity that thrived where rigid order shattered. Captain Maverick watched Elara, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, a silent salute from one leader to another. Glitch, characteristically, was already eyeing the crippled Xylos outpost with a speculative gleam. "Wonder what the salvage rights on this rust bucket will go for," he muttered to Thorne, who was quietly ensuring the Cathar survivors were fit for transfer, offering one last nutrient bar to a grateful researcher. The Cathar rescue mission proceeded efficiently. The survivors were transferred to the guiding light. The humans, however, politely declined passage. "Thanks for the offer, Commander," Maverick said, "but the stray dog got us through this and she'll get us home. We've got some patching up to do ourselves." The Cathar commander looked at their battered freighter, then at the determined faces of its crew. "As you wish, Captain. Your courage, and that of your crew, has been noted." Hours later, as the stray dog, its hull bearing fresh scars but its engines rumbling with stubborn life, prepared for a slow, cautious departure towards the nearest capable repair yard, a small Cathar shuttle detached from the guiding light and approached them. It was Scholar Elara Vayne. "Captain Maverick," she hailed them, her image appearing on their main view screen. She looked more like her old self, her attire pristine, but the newfound confidence remained in her eyes. "On behalf of the Cathar Science Conclave and with the full backing of the Rescue Fleet Command, I am authorized to extend our deepest gratitude and a proposal." Maverick raised an eyebrow. "We're listening." "Your unique methodologies in extreme environmental crisis management have proven unexpectedly effective," Elara stated, a hint of a smile in her voice. "The Conclave would be most interested in funding a collaborative research initiative to study these techniques further, perhaps even a joint expedition to other challenging locales." Glitch perked up. You mean you'd pay us to break stuff and then fix it under pressure? I like the sound of that. Maverick chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. She looked at Elara, seeing not just a Cathar scholar, but a kindred spirit forged in the heart of a storm. The space orcs had not only survived, they'd earned something far more valuable than credits. Maybe, Scholar Vayne, Captain Maverick said, a genuine grin spreading across her face. Maybe, if the price is right. As the stray dog turned and began its journey out of the Whispering Maelstrom, leaving the silent, crippled Xylos Outpost behind, Elara Vayne watched them go. The dawn after the storm was not just a literal one. It was the dawn of a new understanding, a grudging respect for the chaotic, resilient, and undeniably vital force that was humanity.